So these billboards around Westminster, on the London Underground, which, I mean, first and foremost, how are they allowed when you're not allowed a skinny model in a bikini, but somehow you're allowed to promote death, for goodness sake? The moral compass of the people selecting these ads is ridiculous. But these are being pushed by Global. And I know you've been speaking to Charlotte Gill, who's put some good videos together. This is the one you're showing on screen now, I believe. And she's looked into this, and Global seem to be behind a lot of this push for death. They are bankrolling our good friend Carol Vorderman. They're bankrolling the led by donkeys. They're bankrolling, of course, news agents. And so there's lots of far left activity being pushed in the United Kingdom by Global, much in the same way that George Soros pushes it in the United States. For some reason, there are dark forces at play here with people with a lot of money and a depopulation agenda that are pushing euthanasia. At the same time that abortion is being pushed, we live in a death cult, don't we? Our society is so dark. Our population is decreasing rapidly. Our birth rate is 1.4. It used to be 2.4. It's gone down in the last couple of decades, in that the mother and the father are no longer replacing themselves in the family. We have abortion as the biggest killer of people in the West. 250,000 babies are killed every year in the UK. And now we're talking about ending even more lives. Like, why, everywhere we look, are we killing and ending lives?
Breaking right now, growing fears that legalized suicide will be voted through the House of Commons in the UK after just a 5-hour debate on Friday. Labour is changing the face of this country in many ways. No one expected this to happen so quickly. And I want to show you a video now at a tube station right near the Houses of Parliament. And you will see that suicide and this assisted dying is being commercialized. It is almost being fetishized in some way now, with these advertisements promoting the need for this bill to pass. And this has obviously sparked quite an outrage, with Tim Stanley, the columnist for the Daily Telegraph, posting on X, "I'm glad they did this because this is where it ends. The moment capitalism gets into the death market, it'll become the next must-have product." And look, today I want to pass the floor over on this to Father Calvin Robinson, because Father, a lot of people are seeking spiritual guidance, especially MPs who are torn on this, who are worried about this, but are maybe leaning towards voting for the bill. What's your message as to why they should not?
Because we have to look at these things logically. We have to look at these things with reason. And the other side will just push forward emotive arguments and anecdotes left, right, and center in order to break down our barriers and essentially blackmail us into doing this. Because they'll say things like, you know, I had a loved one and I didn't want my loved one to suffer. They had to suffer. It was awful. And of course, nobody wants their loved ones to suffer. Nobody does. It's horrible to go through that experience. Anyone that's had a loved one die can affirm that experience. However, what we need to do is look at helping people through their suffering, not removing their suffering. No one can live a life without suffering. It's part of the human experience. We are born, we suffer, we die, right? The Christian would say it's part of the sanctifying experience. It's getting us prepared for heaven. It's getting us from where we are to where we need to be. But even if you take Christianity out of it for a moment, it's about, do we love that person? Yes. So we make them comfortable. We help them. We already have palliative care. We have lots of things in this country that other countries don't have. But if they're not working well enough, let's address those. Let's not just end the person's life, because there have been so many instances of people that have gone through this process and right at the last minute, they've wanted to change their minds. And sometimes the process has failed and we've heard their stories, but other times the process has gone ahead and we never hear their stories. There are instances where things do not work. There's a story in Switzerland of a death pod that malfunctioned. And we find out later during the autopsy that there are strangulation marks around the person's neck. We don't know what the ins and outs of that are. But either way, look, God decides when we're born. God decides when we die. If we put that in the hands of the state instead of our Lord and Savior, and then that means that the state has authority over when we are born and when we die. And at the outlet, it might seem great. It might seem, on the extremities, there are people that are going through extreme suffering and we want to end their suffering. But once we sign that legislation, once that becomes law of the land, that the state can dictate or the healthcare professionals can dictate when someone is to be killed, then that slippery slope is just the start of the journey. And we don't have to look too far afield. Canada is still part of the Commonwealth. They still have our king as their sovereign monarch, and they have euthanasia, assisted killing, assisted suicide, whatever we're going to call it. I don't care about the euphemisms. It's the process that I'm against. And so they have it. And so they started out, when someone's in extreme suffering, we're going to end their life. That's where they began. And now there have been so many cases I've talked about on my show back on the old platform of there was a veteran who couldn't afford housing. He was offered suicide. There was an elderly person who couldn't walk up the stairs, physically couldn't walk up, but couldn't afford a stair lift, was offered suicide. There's a teenager who's depressed. I mean, what teenager hasn't felt depressed at some point, was offered suicide? So the poor, the vulnerable, the burdens on society, and I use that in inverted commas because everyone feels like a burden at some point in their lives. And if you're vulnerable and you're innocent, why should you be offered death as a solution to a worldly problem? It's monstrous. And people will say there'll be protections in place. Yeah, there will be protections in place, but it doesn't matter because once this is on the legislation, once this is in our law, it will be twisted and manipulated. We already see every other law of the land being twisted and manipulated against the people at present. Do we trust our government and our National Health Service to have our best interests at heart at all times when they have massive bills to pay? They have millions and billions of pounds to find left, right, and centre, and actually it's far cheaper to end our life than to keep us alive.
There's also, Calvin, the prospect of capitalism becoming a big part of the death market. And look, we already see in the Daily Telegraph this week that Dr. Philip Nitschke is ready to launch his very controversial invention of death pods in Britain if the assisted dying law passes. Your thoughts?
It makes me sick. I mean, there are so many things we talk about that I get angry about or passionate about, but this one just makes me feel physically sick, that people are trying to capitalize on state-sanctioned killing of vulnerable people. And that's exactly what this is. We can't talk about it any other way. We're already seeing that. So these billboards around Westminster, on the London Underground, which, I mean, first and foremost, how are they allowed when you're not allowed a skinny model in a bikini, but somehow you're allowed to promote death, for goodness sake? The moral compass of the people selecting these ads is ridiculous. But these are being pushed by Global. And I know you've been speaking to Charlotte Gill, who's put some good videos together. This is the one you're showing on screen now, I believe. And she's looked into this, and Global seem to be behind a lot of this push for death. They are bankrolling our good friend Carol Vorderman. They're bankrolling the Led by Donkeys. They're bankrolling, of course, newsagents. And so there's lots of far left activity being pushed in the United Kingdom by Global, much in the same way that George Soros pushes it in the United States. For some reason, there are dark forces at play here with people with a lot of money and a depopulation agenda that are pushing euthanasia at the same time that abortion is being pushed. So at the start of our life and the end of our life, somehow the state wants to have control. And we can't take all of these things out of context. What's the biggest fight we're having in the United Kingdom right now? Farmers. Their land is being taken away from them. So it's all of it comes down to power, how we live, when we live, how we feed ourselves when we're allowed to live. The state has way too much authority at the moment. It is like a communist regime. It terrifies me that if my mother gets old or my father gets old and they become disabled or they mentally incapable, that the state will be having a conversation with them about potentially ending their lives. And it will be pushed. People say it won't be pushed. It will be pushed. I know so many women already who've gone to the doctor because they've fallen pregnant in circumstances outside of their control, and abortion has been pushed as an option rather than offered as an option, or rather than having a conversation. Liberals will say it's a conversation, you can have a choice. I would say that choice is abhorrent, but either way, to have it pushed on vulnerable women is disgusting. And so if abortion is pushed at one end of the life, why wouldn't euthanasia be pushed at the other end of the life? Why wouldn't they say, well, you know what? You're right. You are suffering. You're not going to get better. Your life is going to be miserable from now on. You've got kids. Maybe you want to think about leaving them your estate while you still can. Get around inheritance tax, the government's pushing, etc., etc., etc. Maybe the best option is, or one of the options you could take is ending your life now. It's disgusting, it's evil, and actually we want to help people live as long as they are naturally living. The whole premise of life is from conception until natural death, and that's the only good way to live.
You mentioned this great work that Charlotte Gill is doing, Father Calvin. There's also a really odd thing going on with Paul Brand from ITV. Now, do you remember Paul Brand was the guy who effectively is credited with driving Boris Johnson from office? He was completely obsessed about it, but he doesn't give a damn about focusing on terrible examples of corruption and lies from Labour MPs like Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, which I'll come to in 1 second. But Charlotte has done some real investigation into this and is showing that Paul Brand has actually become an activist for assisted dying. So she posts on X, look how many tweets Paul Brand has done about assisted dying. I actually stopped copying them as there were so many. This isn't normal. This isn't news. And what's so interesting, Calvin, is the posts that he makes are all in favor of assisted dying. So, for example, this poll by More in Common finding that the public apparently support assisted dying by 5-1. That's been debunked as soon as you show the public the details of the bill. He talks about Liz Kendall talking about assisted dying. He retweets Keir Starmer talking about it. It's very interesting, isn't it, that the media class, Father Calvin, have effectively decided to campaign on this issue. We've partnered with Gundry MD to share this information with you. Would you believe that if I told you right now, inside your pantry is one of the healthiest foods on the planet? Yes, it's true. And it's not some weird trendy superfood. Spoiler alert, it's olive oil. You're probably used to cooking with it, but there are countless ways to use olive oil to help yourself look and feel younger. For example, olive oil is a natural way to help you achieve a more youthful appearance. Besides helping you look younger on the outside, it's a fantastic tool for your insides as well. According to Dr. Stephen Gundry, a famous cardiothoracic surgeon, nutrition expert, and health advocate, you should get as much high-quality olive oil into your daily routine as possible, whether it's taking a shot of it daily or keeping a bottle of it in your bathroom medicine cupboard. But what kind of olive oil is best for your health? Well, any olive oil can give you some benefits, but if you're looking to get the best results, it matters a lot which one you pick. The olive oil industry is huge. You can tell by the number of olive oil's brands you see at the grocery store, and you can bet they're not all made with the consumer in mind. And many brands may even cut corners one way or another to increase profits. When Dr. Gundry came to this realization, he was appalled. But some olive oils are so powerful, it may only take a few tablespoons a week to see these incredible health benefits. So how can you tell between an olive oil that can be a health booster and which one isn't up to par? In an effort to answer that question, Dr. Gundry has decided to take a stand and release his personal research and findings. The video has gone viral since its release, and it's important you see it so you can start benefiting immediately. So you can watch right now by going to getolive1.com/outspoken or by clicking the link in the description box below. So let me repeat that. That's getolive1.com/outspoken or just click on the link in the description box below. People who have taken his advice have shared their results with him, saying the olive oil they bought after learning his simple rules have helped change their lives. So make sure you go to getolive1.com/outspoken or click on the link in the description box below. But now back to the show.
We live in a death cult, don't we? Our society is so dark. Our population is decreasing rapidly. Our birth rate is 1.4. It used to be 2.4. It's gone down in the last couple of decades in that the mother and the father are no longer replacing themselves in the family. We have Abortion as the biggest killer of people in the West. 250,000 babies are killed every year in the UK. And now we're talking about ending even more lives. Like, why, everywhere we look, are we killing and ending lives? Why are we not incentivizing the family? Why are we not encouraging people to have big families, to have children and to grow the nation and therefore grow the economy? Why are we pushing death on native Britons left, right, and centre whilst having mass legal and illegal immigration at the same time? I mean, I am not a conspiracy theorist, I'm really not, but it does look like some kind of mass replacement theory is under play. It looks like the people with vested interests are making a killing somehow, and it always comes down to money. I don't know where the money trail leads to in this regard, but it always comes down to money.
Yeah, and literally making a killing, Calvin. Look, speaking of Rachel Reeves, I actually want to give credit right now to our former employers at GB News, because, Calvin, I have been saying for weeks, why has no mainstream media journalist, not one, put a question about Rachel Reeves' fake lives and her completely concocted CV and loads of other lies? Why has not one journalist in this country put the question to anyone representing Labour, anyone from the government? They certainly haven't asked Rachel Reeves, they haven't asked Starmer. Finally, GB News did ask a Labour minister. It was the Employment Minister, Alison McGovern, and it was Isabel Webster who was the journalist with the balls to do this. Let's take a look at the exchange, Calvin. I'll get you to react off the back.
What would you say to anybody who's thinking about doctoring their CV? Would that be considered within the rules? I ask because, of course, the Chancellor of the Exchequer has been found guilty of that, although facing no repercussions for it.
I'm really sorry, I'm not sure what you're referring to there, because the Chancellor of the Exchequer is an extremely qualified person to be taking.
Yeah, but she lied on her LinkedIn as well, you know, claiming to have been an economist at the Bank of England when she worked in retail at HSBC. Totally different.
No, I'm sorry, but she was an economist at the Bank of England.
Yes, but not the dates that she claimed.
Very well qualified economist.
It was also while she was a trainee at university.
To do her job.
Okay, so that's fine within the rules for any youngsters that want to get on.
Bank of England economist. I'm not really sure what we're. I'm not really sure what we're arguing here over, because I don't think anybody
rules
would
and
say
people
that
trying
Rachel
to get
Reeves
jobs.
is not
I was
an
just
economist.
checking whether or not that was permitted.
As I've said, people should stick to the rules. You've put to me some kind of allegation that Rachel Reeves is not an economist, when in fact she is, and she's a very well qualified person to be doing her job.
My allegation was about her changing her LinkedIn,
so actually,
which
what we
know to be a fact. Anyway, we can move on because we're not progressing here.
Good on her, Father Calvin. Good on her for putting the question. Pathetic answer.
They don't like it up on the day. She did not like being asked that question. And of course, they always twist it. You've accused her of not being an economist. She's an economist. No, we're accusing her of lying on her CV and saying she was something that she wasn't at a time that she wasn't. It's very clear what happened. Don't try and weasel out of it. This is why people don't like politicians. They can never be straight up, can they? But yeah, fair play to Isabel Webster. Always liked Isabel Webster. As far as moderates go, she's a good one.
Yes, indeed. Thank you so much for watching Dan Wootton Outspoken. Please click on my face just to the bottom left to subscribe to this brand new independent news source and turn on the notification bell so you'll be alerted to our brand new live shows, uncancelled interviews, and special royal episodes. Outspoken is also now available as a podcast, so you can listen to the show every weekday on the go, wherever you are.